So I give the word now to you, Dave, and all of the questions will be answered after the presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks for the kind introduction. Really nice. Thanks. Hello everyone. My name's Dave. I can see a lot of familiar faces and names on the call, so nice to see you all again. Thanks for tagging along. And welcome to my talk at ATV 23. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. If not, this will turn it round. This will be the best talk you've ever listened to in your life, so strap yourselves in. If you're enjoying it, hopefully this will be a nice little add-on to what we've already gone through. There are a couple of polls I want to kick us off with, and these are all around the Scrum values. Before I dive into any detail, any preamble, any stories, so what I've done is I've put a little QR code in the middle there, or there's the link to access Slido and the access code. There's only 2 questions, so I promise you this won't be a painful affair. But the first question I've got there is, which Scrum value is the most important? I'll give a minute or two for people to get on there, but really interested to see, have we got a trend or an idea on which of these values is most important to a Scrum team? I'll give that a minute or two and hopefully I'll see some footfall on the poll. Okay, we've got a bit of a split so far. And almost everything's got a vote, bar 1, which is interesting. Okay, I'll give this 10 more seconds. Okay, interesting. So I'll just bring this over before I switch the question. But interesting results on most important, openness and commitment, getting lion's share of the votes. Focus and respect, a couple of votes as well. Nothing for courage, which is really interesting. Either people feeling very brave or maybe it doesn't matter. And as we can see, commitment's just pulled into the lead. Okay, great stuff. And next, I've got a second question to cover. Slightly different flavor to this one. If you were to add a Scrum value, what would you add? So we've got focus, openness, commitment, respect, and courage. What would be number 6 in your view? What would be a really nice bolt on or something that you would add to the mix if you got given the chance? I'll give this a minute or two. I can see a few coming through already. Really interesting stuff. Okay, I'll give this another 10, 15 seconds. Okay, and I'll just pull this one across as well. So I asked this question with a lot of different teams, and there's a few results in here that we see quite a bit. Growth, adaptability, key ones. Empathy, a really nice one from the design thinking sort of teams and professionals. Trust always an interesting one. I've often asked the question, is trust really a value? According to the Scrum Guide, the values exist to support and propagate trust within a team. But it's always an interesting discussion point. Collaboration, another good one. Continuous learning, all really good themes. That's all I've got in terms of polls to kick us off. But the reason I ask those questions is the first question people normally ask for Scrum values is, why do they matter? There's a lot of different thoughts on this, and a lot of people sort of dismiss it out of hand when they're first reading through the Scrum Guide. But there's a few reasons for me that Scrum values are important. In terms of what makes a project successful, it's more than just delivering things on time, on budget, and the shared set of standards and values that Scrum values create give a really good sort of almost a collective conscience to the team that acts as a bit of a guide when we're making complex decisions or when we're having to make ruthless prioritizations. The Scrum framework offers 5 core values. As we've just gone through, we've got focus, openness, commitment, courage, respect. The These help teams work together effectively and achieve goals. As part of this talk, I'm going to touch on each of those in turn. And as we've touched on, those values are there to incentivize and propagate trust within the team. I'm hoping we'll show you some actionable, tangible stuff that will really help you guys build the values into your teams in a more explicit way. I'm a firm believer that it's very easy when you first read the Scrum Guide to look at the values and overlook them. But what I found in my experience, especially as I've become a more experienced and more mature practitioner of Agile and Scrum, the values, when they're embraced, they really do serve to create that trust, that shared purpose, the transparency and the accountability within a team. They really help to catalyze strong relationships within a team and stakeholders as well. And they can adapt to changing circumstances with a greater level of flexibility and ease. Once we understand and we all, I compare this to playing a principled game as either a football team or a chess player. If you understand what the principles that your team are trying to embody either on the pitch or on the board are, the decision making becomes slightly more easy because you're all driving towards the same thing. You're all singing from the same song sheet. You all know what's important as a team and how your individual contribution feeds towards that. I'll just touch a little bit on my journey with the values because I didn't always give them the respect they were probably due. I can remember when I first read the Scrum Guide and I came across the section with the values in, and I almost dismissed it immediately. It sort of came across as just be a nice guy and everything will be better in work. It felt very fluffy and very light touch in terms of how am I actually going to apply this? I mean, it's one thing to say focus is good, commitment's good. What does that really mean? I did memorize them to get through certification exams and things like that, but I was more interested in using other elements of the framework. So things like, let's get some events in the calendar. Let's make sure people understand their new accountabilities. How do we ensure that the artifacts are up to date and the transparency is maximized? Those were the bits that I really wanted to get stuck into. And that's exactly what I did. I dove straight in, started working with Scrum, and it brought a lot of benefits to our ways of working before. I came from a traditional project management style background, so a lot of what Scrum gave us and a lot of the progress that we made was a real step change. And over time, we were able to get better, more regular stakeholder interactions, products tick more of the boxes, and it felt like generally we were moving in the right direction and we were hitting the target a lot more often than we did previously. That was early days with Scrum. As time started to go on, though, the progress that we experienced early started to stagnate. I started to notice some elements of the Scrum project, and I'm sure a lot of you have run into these issues too. Team members and stakeholders were attending events on autopilot. We were having the same questions and the same discussions at events. We were going through production for production's sake, i.e., leaning towards those feature factory tendencies where we just get stuff out the door for the sake of getting stuff out. I noticed, and this was a real shocker for me because we had a lot of resistance when I first brought Scrum in. And as the team got more and more experience with Scrum, they sort of crystallized around Scrum and became very averse to changing Scrum itself, which was very shocking to me. I sort of thought I did a good idea of saying we're going to be more flexible and adaptable. I think the team sort of took that as, okay, Scrum means flexible and adaptable. Let's stick to Scrum as best we can. That resistance to change was shocking. There was less and less autonomy within the team as time went on. They would lean very heavily on the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the Scrum process to cover problems for them instead of taking on that autonomous and brave role. And silos began to develop within the team again. That was really shocking as well. The cross-functionality went away. There was lots of handoffs within the team, and blame and finger pointing started to come out in retrospectives and daily Scrum sessions. A lot of this was really shocking to me. I thought we were sort of past it when we started getting Scrum in there. And very quickly, I had quite a long list of impediments that I had generated by embedding Scrum within the team, and none of these were mentioned in the guide. As I read through the guide over and over, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong or what we can do to address this, the value section became more and more prevalent. And what I did is sort of almost a bit of a thought exercise. I looked at each problem that I had through the lens of a value or a pillar of the framework. So either one of the values that we've touched on or transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And I could see how when looking at the problems through a lens of a value or a pillar, I could start to piece together either what was missing or what had been allowed to go a bit too far and needed to be reeled in slightly in terms of values, pillars, or those sort of guiding mantras within the team. After a couple of experiments, I became a much more firm advocate of the values. I now look at these as the real sort of value and gold of the framework. A trend I often notice with experienced practitioners is the longer and more time they spend adopting and working with Scrum and Scrum teams, the more they appreciate the Scrum values and the more that they see the reason that they are mentioned. What I would love to see in future versions of the Scrum Guide is more guidance and more narrative around the intention behind each value, just to make sure that the understanding is standardized somewhat. But that would just be in the vein of the starting out phase that I'm talking about. I think what I'll also cover in this talk towards the latter stages is evolving beyond just the Scrum values. But I hope that just serves as a bit of an example for why, as some of you no doubt think, the values seem a bit fluffy, they seem a bit light touch. I promise you, if you stick with them, you will be able to see more and more value with them. So creating steps forward for me. As a development Scrum Master, I noticed that everyone says that the Scrum values are good. Everyone says that it's the right thing to do. The frustrating thing as someone who was new to Scrum and embedding it within various teams was there wasn't much tangible or actionable guidance on how to foster these values within the team. It was focus is good, commitment's good, respect's good. And while I agree, what I was really looking for was methods, strategies, steps that I could take to embed those more habitually within the team. I went through several experimentation cycles and a bit of analysis after each in conjunction with the team to analyze and understand what was working to maximize the values and the positive effects that they had, and also look at when maybe the values are going too far. A value like courage can quickly become out of hand, commitment the same. There's a double-edged sword to each of these, and it really is a bit of a balancing act on how far you go with each of them. The other thing, looking at the values a little deeper, helped me to understand helped me to organize my thinking around the other elements of the framework, like events, roles, artifacts, accountabilities. When I look at the values more deeply, I can really start to connect the dots between how the practices and behaviors and the values all fit together to create the real value of the framework. It also brings home that a lot of things that seem very surface level in the guide have deeper and deeper levels that you can drill into as you become more experienced and more mature as a team. Again, I went through a bit of a mental gymnastics routine, going over elements of the framework with a lens of a value or pillar, and trying to develop more of an understanding on how they all fit together. That's sort of a bit of a preamble around why I think the values are important, some of the problems that I ran into, a bit of an idea on how I started to make these steps forward. What I'll do next is I'll go through each of the values one by one. And what I'd try to do in this talk is give 4 or 5 ideas on either an existing part of the Scrum framework that you can frame slightly differently to foster the value more proactively, or an experiment or some kind of behavior that you can trial out within your team and see what kind of effect that has on the value. The first one that we'll start with is commitment. Commitment covers being dedicated to achieving the team goals. And here I think about sprint and product goals, supporting each other in the pursuit of the goals. And even if your team doesn't use Scrum, you can apply this value by setting clear expectations and holding yourself accountable for achieving the goals that you want to get to. Quick example on this one, you might commit to completing a task by a certain date within a certain time box, or to attending all the team meetings and actively participating in the discussions for that sprint. But let's go through some steps to foster commitment. The first one that I'd like to talk about is co-creating a shared vision. And Scrum Masters can work with the Scrum team, the product owner, and the developers to collaborate on a vision that generates a lot of buy-in. You can think of this as sort of a mission statement for the sprint, a moonshot. This ensures a lot of alignment, creates a shared sense of ownership, and helps to generate commitment towards the goals and aims. I think a lot of teams, when they're struggling with commitment, it's because they don't quite understand where it is they're going or what they're trying to deliver. That shared vision really plugs a lot of gaps there. Next one for me is regularly raise transparency. teams are better able to commit to goals or forecast where they think they'll fall in relation to those goals if the transparency is very high. When there's a transparent view of the work involved, changes in the immediate environment, dependencies and blockers, they can be detected very quickly and we can start addressing them as they arise and as our understanding develops. I always like to look for ways to increase transparency, and in the process, that creates a really solid foundation for trust to begin to grow between the team members. Collaboration, really the fabric of the framework. The more the team work together and spread their cross-functionality and skills, the more effectively they can support each other and be in position to more firmly commit as a team to more challenging goals. What I like to see with Scrum teams is we commit to something that's quite conservative that we know we'll achieve. We generate a bit of confidence and a bit of buy-in. As we get through those first 2 or 3 sprints, though, I really like to see the ambition start to grow slightly. Not to a point where the ambition becomes unhinged, but to a point where we're giving ourselves a bit of a stretch target and we know that the people that we're working with are the people who will be able to support us to get there. This is really when the individual members of a team become more than the sum of their parts, when the commitment's high and the collaboration is in place. Final step to foster communication is around designing a clear and effective definition of done. I'm sure we've all used definitions of done, and I'm sure we've all run into situations where perhaps there's elements of the DoD or items within there that really don't make a lot of sense when we look at it at first glance. The value of the definition of done is it gives us a really clear view on where the finish line is for a piece of work or a feature or epic, whatever it is, whatever level we want to look at this at. When we've got the vision of where we want to go, pairing that with a really clear checklist with a really clear set of criteria for what means this is done is really helpful for the team to foster that level of commitment. They're much more likely to be able to say yes or no based on that. And by understanding that future state that the work must meet to be considered complete, predictability, commitment, delivering successfully, all of these things start to rise. The final bit I'll touch on for each of these values is a value killer. And this is a practice, a behavior, an element that may set in that's going to have a direct detriment to the value that we've got. For commitment, I touched on it just now, but this is unhinged ambition. The key to fostering effective commitment is to operate in what's called the zone of proximal development. For anyone who studied psychology or any parents on the call, actually, you'll probably be used to this as well. You bring up your children, you teach your team, you educate customers in a way that you're operating towards the edge of their capability. You don't want it to be so easy that it's not a challenge and boring. Equally, you don't want it to be too challenging that it's not achievable. You want to be operating in that zone of proximal development. Unhinged ambition is going too far beyond that. We're committing to stuff that we know we can't do. We've got too many stories to take on. The features are too big. This is really what's going to kill your commitment and build in a sense of apathy within the team. As I say, committing to things that are a bit of a stretch but not a hopeless mission is key. And overcommitment's the fast track to creating low morale and that sense of apathy within the team. As we go through each value, I'll combine the notepads like this. But for commitment, 5 steps that you can take, 1 to avoid. Seems simple enough, but let's just keep going. Focus is the next one I like to touch on. Focus is, in my mind, concentrating on the task at hand, minimizing distractions. Any Kanban practitioners on the call be very familiar with this type of narrative feel, these type of behaviors, making sure that we keep the work in progress low. We continue to just focus on one thing at a time and make sure that we get things done before starting something else, pull systems over, push and all that good stuff. In a fast-paced environment, and especially in a complex environment, it's easy to lose focus and become overwhelmed by competing priorities. By setting clear boundaries, by embracing some of the limitations, you can improve your productivity and the quality of the work that we deliver. For example, we might set aside time boxes for checking emails, for taking calls, and then we put other time aside for other activities that we don't want to have that interruption or interactivity in. And we might set aside days, time boxes where we reduce multitasking to a minimum. We work on one thing at a time. And let's go through some steps for focus. So again, another element of the framework we're all familiar with, the sprint goal. Making the sprint goal clear and concise really helps the team to stay focused on what they need to achieve during the sprint and guides their daily steps towards the finish line. The sprint goal should be something that's very transparent, explicit. The team should be talking about this in daily scrums. How are we progressing towards that goal? Are we on track to achieve? Are there any blockers or any impediments that are in the way from us getting to that goal? At a team level, the sprint goal should be sort of the one whip item that's going at the time. Moving forward, reducing multitasking. Apologies, advocating for time box meetings. We're going to look for time box meetings like the daily scrum. This helps the team to increase the potency of those events. If we know we've only got 15 minutes to have a daily scrum, we're not going to go into wandering, meandering discussions where we can burn a lot of time looking at issues that maybe can be addressed elsewhere, which leads to a direct impact to the value that we create in those sessions. We make sure that we're addressing the highest priority, the most potent stuff. Everything else can be handled elsewhere. This goes beyond daily scrums. We can look at this in reviews that are time-boxed, retrospective sessions, even things like, this has been removed from the guide, but things like refinement. Having refinement time boxes is also really helpful to make sure that we aren't going into the gold plating territory. We aren't exploring too far. We're really focused on generating potent value out of these sessions. Reducing multitasking. So context switching is a real detriment to teams. The research varies, and I think a lot of it is a bit oversold, but there's a real impact, especially when we're working on software development teams, complex knowledge work. The effort it takes to switch gears between tasks has a direct friction and slowdown in terms of progress. This really harms focus, and by fostering that focus on one task at a time, you can help the team, help yourself, help other developers to stay on track and deliver high quality work. Promoting a mindset of, and again, for Kanban practitioners, starting less and finishing more. That's a really core mantra that I like to publicize within teams. We should be focused on what we need to do because we believe it's the highest priority, the most valuable thing we can do at the time. And we look at other items as we get this one done. Removing impediments. So I've been pulled up on this a couple of times in the Agile sphere and universe around Scrum Masters don't particularly remove impediments, they just cause them to be removed. To me, it's a bit of semantic wordplay, whether the Scrum Master does it, whether the Scrum Master helps a developer to do it, whether the Scrum Master goes to management and leadership to get them to remove an impediment for them. I think the key thing is the impediment gets removed by hook or by crook. Scrum Masters should be detecting these impediments, have them raised up from the team, and then be either working towards enabling the team to remove them, helping the team to remove them directly, or raising the appropriate people to get them out of the way. This can include things like technical debt, resource constraints, time constraints, skills within the team, overwhelming work in progress. There's tons of constraints that we can work on, and making sure that they are removed really helps to foster that focus within the team. Protecting space for deep work. So this goes hand in hand with the prioritization discussion that we talked about earlier. I always like to encourage teams to protect some space for deep work. I work with a lot of software delivery teams, and I know there's nothing worse than when you're working on a really complex issue that's quite technical, and you have the pings come up from Slack saying, "Hello, are you free? Can I talk to you for 2 minutes?" It just sort of car crashes the focus, and you can quite easily lose the strands of thought that you were working on as you're progressing towards solving a problem. What I like to do is get team members to split their days, so they'll have periods where they're available to chat. I can ping them for updates. We can get together and chat. We can discuss anything that's on their mind, really. But what I also like them to do is protect space for that deep work. Make sure that they've got space in the day allocated for the deep, really grinding type of work that they need to do, and that the distractions within that period are minimized. So things like turning off notifications, closing down email clients, making sure that time is protected to do the deep, technical, really thought-intensive work that they'd like to do. Important to note, I've had some teams that I work with where developers say, right, I'll block out 7.5 hours today because I really need to focus. The key thing is, while it's important to protect that space, it's very rare you can be in that flow state for a full day for very long at all. It should be, again, as we talked about with the Scrum events, small time boxed potent pieces where we really hit things hard and then we move on to something else. I don't think giving a full day or the better part of a full day to that deep type of work pursuit is suitable in most cases. I've got no doubt there'll be exceptions, but just as we talked about, time boxing them, making them really potent and value generating is another key point around protecting that deep work. And the value killer here, again, no surprise, I hope, to Kanban practitioners especially, but work in progress without limits just robs the team of any chance to commit to focus in any reasonable or tangible way. By setting clear and explicit limits on the number of work items in progress, you can take a real step forward in changing the team's focus and generating a more efficient and predictable flow of value from, if you're a Scrum team, from sprint planning all the way through to delivery in the retrospective. If you're any type of team, through from receiving customer feedback, ideation, all the way through to having it in front of your customers. Very important to be ruthlessly prioritizing and ruthlessly efficient around what you want to work on. And there's our notepad for focus. Moving forward from focus, we come to openness. This encapsulates being transparent with the team, with stakeholders, with everyone in the organization about the state of the workload, the challenges that are in front of you, and how you guys are progressing towards your goals. Even if your team doesn't use Scrum, again, you can still apply this value by sharing information freely and encouraging others to do the same. It's important to me when I work with a team that we are transparent with our progress to a point where if at any point someone from outside of the team, management, leadership, another team who we have dependencies with can come to us, and we can very quickly share our current state and what we're working on, what our problems are. Everything that another team would need to know, we should be able to put together fairly rapidly. Practicing openness within the team is the key to doing that. Let's work through some steps on openness. So Scrum Masters can embrace radical candor in communications. This can be within the team, this can be external to the team, this can be org level at large. By encouraging frank, transparent communication within the team and stakeholders, you begin to shape an environment where team members feel comfortable sharing thoughts, concerns, and ideas openly. There's not that fear of criticism or blame if things are going wrong, if you're struggling with a particularly tough problem. And it leads to developing a culture where understanding that challenge, criticism, any feedback comes from a place of constructive and positivity. It's not about assigning blame and looking for reasons to tear other people down within the team. Next, we go to creating a safe environment for sincere feedback. A bit of a follow-on from the previous step, but we can look at ways where team members are more receptive to feedback and feel more comfortable giving very candid and honest feedback. I work as part of a big consultancy at the moment, and we are, as with most consultancies, there's a lot of feedback cycles, a lot of the 360-degree feedback goes on. A key thing I find is, or a key disappointment I sometimes have, is I can tell that the feedback I get is quite generic, quite safe. There's nothing really in there that's actionable for me. There's nothing in there that tells me what I need to do to keep improving. By fostering this safe environment, and creating a bit of bravery and courage within the team, you can build a resilience level, and the team are far more able to accept feedback that may be more constructive in nature, but B, they're also happy to share a more honest opinion with other members of the team to continue that improvement cycle. The next one I talk about is advocating for curiosity and a willingness to learn. Continuous improvement, willingness to learn. I'm sure that this is prevalent within the teams. Making it more explicit though, and really taking the time to publicize, talk about openly the fact that we make mistakes, but we are committed to learning from them, is where resiliency can begin to flourish within the team. This helps teams remain open to new ideas and ways of working, but it also sets up a really neat mechanism where we pair failures and knowledge gaps within the team with our next steps forward. So when the team are within that safe operating space, the curious and willingness to learn can really come into the fore, and this allows the team to be far more, again, open and explicit around where they see their own weaknesses at the moment and what they want to do to improve those. Next one, utilizing data and metrics. Anyone that was on the previous call, I think this is a bit of a callback to that one. Using data and metrics within the decision-making process really encourages teams to make decisions with a higher degree of openness. We're not debating, or we're not getting caught in endless discussion cycles around what we should do next. We're using data to power some of that decision making for us. And the great thing about especially flow metric data that was presented previously is it gives a really robust and transparent view into how things are performing. It's not as open to narrative discussions as it is if we don't have that data in tow. It really serves as a good mirror for the team to look at. This is what we tried. This has been the effect on our key metrics. How do we think we're doing? The key thing I like to say here is I'm really not a fan of story points and velocity. I think that those two are easily gamed. But as I've touched on a couple of times, key things like the flow metrics from Kanban are a great starter for 10. Much more difficult to game, and these are much more useful for a team to understand how they are performing well, and it gives the team a really easy sort of off-the-shelf solution to share with other teams and leadership and management within the org on how they are performing. Final one from me, no surprise to anyone who follows me on LinkedIn, retrospectives are my favourite. Retrospectives can really serve as a breath of fresh air after hard iterations, after we've been working really tough, long-lived problems. These give teams an avenue to reflect on the work and identify some key areas for improvement. The value derived from a retrospective is really tightly correlated with the level of openness that's on display in the session. By encouraging an atmosphere of constructive feedback and the team remaining open to feedback, the continuous improvement sort of becomes a natural follow-on. If your team are very able in those retrospectives to say how things are going, they're very easily able to say what the weaknesses are, where the gaps are. The next steps forward become a bit of a formality from there. I don't think anyone turns up to work to stagnate, to degrade the performance. Just by making those challenges open, the solutions sort of follow quite naturally from that. Finally, value killer on openness is punishment over progress. Punishment will never change behavior within the team. It'll only suppress what's going on. Instead of not doing that anymore, the team will just start to hide it from people. It's important to look at failure as a learning opportunity. There's times where robust feedback may be needed, but it's important that it isn't perceived as an attack. One thing I often bring up for any football fans, Thierry Henry did a great interview once where he talked about Arsene Wenger having a bit of a coaching conversation with him. Thierry was complaining quite a bit around players not being able to give him the ball the way he wanted it. And Arsene said to him, do you think every player can give you the ball the same way? The key thing that Henry took away from that was he really needs to play to the strengths of each individual within the team. He shouldn't punish them by expecting them all to rise to his level. He should adapt the way he plays, the way he works with that team to emphasize their strengths. This is a really sort of key learning and a really key catalyzing behavior with teams who are maturing and on the path to high performance. A lot of lessons in there for Scrum Masters. I'll try and dig out that interview actually and share it on my LinkedIn later because it's well, for me, a football fan and an agile advocate, it's a bit of a masterpiece for me. Okay, that's openness. And let's move to respect. I am getting slightly close to the line, so I might speed this up slightly. But respect roughly translates to treating others with dignity, recognizing their contributions. Applying this in your team, you can start to actively listen to your teammates, show appreciation for their efforts, ideas, and really embed recognition within the team as a habit and a cornerstone. The 5 steps, we'll start with promoting active listening. During meetings and discussions, really important to ensure that team members feel that they're being heard. There's nothing worse than I think of a couple of previous managers that I've worked with when I've been having coaching conversations. I've barely finished the statement I've said and they're already talking back at me. You sort of know already they haven't really digested or listened to what I've said there. They just couldn't wait for their chance to talk. Really promoting that active listening is a great way to generate some buy-in within the team for you and your role and skills, but also harness that respect factor. Encouraging empathy. Facilitating development of empathy within a team. I don't think you can force people to do it. I think they need to take it as a bit of a personal mission. But Encouraging people to understand others' perspectives is a really big step forward for a lot of teams, especially when we're doing customer-facing work. Having empathy for your users is really important. This involves creating opportunities for team members to walk in each other's shoes, or even walk in customer and stakeholder shoes. Again, active listening within the team and considering different viewpoints, all really helpful to encourage that empathetic outlook. Addressing conflicts constructively. Again, another football analogy. Roy Keane always used to talk about in the Man U team, it wasn't always smooth sailing. There were a lot of arguments, a lot of fights, but they were harnessed in a constructive way for the benefit of the team. It's really important for Scrum teams to harness conflict in a constructive way and not allow resentment or grudges to set in. This helps team members to identify underlying issues. It really is a cornerstone or a really good milestone for your communication is really open and candid if the team can have these constructive conflicts and then move on from them effectively. The key guiding mantra on this should be, we're going to be harsh on the problem and soft on the people. We're not looking to point fingers and blame. We're just looking to do what's best for the team and produce as much value as we can. Avoiding blame and shame. I've touched on this on previous value as well. Very important to exist within a blame-free culture, especially within the immediate team where you have a sphere of influence. If you're in an organization where that is prevalent, nailing this within the team is the first step, and then propagating that out within other teams and wider sort of initiatives, departments within the organization. Focusing on solutions, encouraging a learning-oriented approach, and facilitating open discussions to improve processes, prevent future mistakes. All really good sort of check marks that you can take to avoid that blame and shame culture. Recognize and appreciate differences. We're all different. None of us are the same that come into work, and we all want to feel like we can bring our full selves to work and really exist as ourselves when we're working as part of a team. By celebrating the diversity, recognizing everyone's unique skills and experiences, we can start to harness those perspectives, and ultimately it's a benefit to the team. It avoids the tunnel vision, brings in dissenting voices, and really helps to maximize that respect factor in terms of creating value. And a free bonus step. Respect is great, but it's important to lead by example. Treating all team members with kindness, respect, valuing their skills and experiences, even during challenging situations, and demonstrating that firm commitment to building a culture of respect and inclusivity. To me, this is part of your duty as a Scrum Master. If you aren't setting the tone effectively, I don't know how you can truly expect the team to do this as well. By leading with respect, you can inspire the team to follow suit. You can create a more positive, supportive work environment, and teamwork, collaboration, and high performance can really begin to thrive. The big threat to respect is failure to recognize, and this is recognition in terms of the efforts that people are putting in, the lengths that they're going to, their skills, experience, perspectives. You get further with encouragement than criticism, I've found. I don't advocate for becoming a cheerleader for the team, but taking the time to relay what's going well or passing on what you perceive as the highlights of the team during retros, one-to-ones, daily scrums. You're really creating that firm vision in the team's mind that my contributions are recognized and I'm not going unnoticed as part of this team. Everything's being fairly evaluated, and we're all working towards the same goals. That's respect. Final value I'll touch on is courage. Here we're talking about taking risks, speaking up when necessary to achieve the team's goals, having those uncomfortable conversations that we might not have if trust isn't really there. Similar one, we could talk about fostering safe environments, creating an environment where it's safe to share this feedback, where you aren't going to be victimized or singled out for sharing tough conversations. Advocating for tough perspectives is going to be key. We can encourage risk taking, and this is again one of those double-edged swords where we want to operate within that zone of proximal development. We don't want to take risks that are meaningless and ultimately don't help us to learn anything. Equally, we don't want to take risks that are far too big and are very likely to result in failure. We want to take calculated, educated risks so that we can learn, validate our assumptions as quickly as we can, and use that to recycle into updated learnings future value items that we might move into, and build a contextual awareness of our product development, of the environment that we're operating in, that'll help future iterations. Challenging the status quo, very important for Scrum Masters, but it's also helpful to harness this within a team. Challenging the status quo within the team is step one. We can go to wider org, we can go to department level after that. But encouraging team members to question assumptions, explore new things. This helps to grow that continuous improvement culture that we've touched on with a lot of the values. And really, when paired with a Kaizen approach, it allows the team to look for even the smallest incremental improvements that we can make to start smoothing our path over time and really embed that continuous improvement habit. Encouraging dissenting opinions. Very similar to the tough conversations one that we've had in openness. It's important that we don't succumb to groupthink, that we're always thinking of alternate perspectives. We always have the option to explore additional ideas if we like. It's also important to think about we don't want to fall into the trap of we've always done it this way, we'll just continue doing it this way. We've got to be brave enough to look for other things. We've got to be brave enough to float those ideas and then receive the feedback on those and change or adjust course as needed. Final one is concentrate on impact. Embedding a courageous outlook within the team becomes easier when we've got those really firm finish lines and we understand what's going to create the most impact. Understanding the purpose of the work and how it fits into broad organizational level goals is really helpful. And that helps elevate team thinking beyond just the immediate team. It helps them think of the org, the department, the initiative that you're working on as a whole. The larger and more ambitious the programs, projects, portfolios you work on, the more teams you'll be involved with. So elevating beyond the immediate team sphere, very important. And lastly, the killer for this one, we've touched on this one a couple of times as well, the blame game. When we're part of a blame culture, if things go wrong, the immediate reaction, whose fault is this? Who can we blame? Who gets this pinned on? We should really be looking for root causes to problems, rectifying those and moving on. An environment where there's blame fosters fear. Team members become more wary of taking actions that can lead to mistakes. We're very unlikely to stretch ourselves anymore. We really want to execute within what we know is achievable and within our current skill set. Team members can start to become risk averse, preferring to stick to tried and tested methods, and exploring new approaches really goes away. If there's one thing you take away as part of this values discussion, the blaming and shaming element is really step number one that you should look to root out to ensure that the values can propagate within the team. Okay, and just in case you want to screenshot these for later, these are the 5 notepads that we've put together, some high-level steps. If anyone wants to reach out and discuss them in more detail, I'm happy to. But in the last couple of minutes, I just want to talk a little bit about how you move things forward. So don't stop at Scrum. Scrum values are great, but like most things in the guide, it's a really good starter for 10. The intention is always for you to transcend and evolve beyond and add updates. Really look for things that are contextually important to you to improve your value delivery overall. Knowing your team and looking for the behaviors and levers is important. Have a bit of a sentinel approach. Notice what's driving team behaviors. Look for hidden values that are driving behaviors, and then try to raise the transparency on those. There's lots of existing tools out there that can help you. Things like the Management 3.0 Moving Motivators game that I've got on screen now. These are 10 other values outside of the Scrum values. And there's an exercise where we take these cards, each team member prioritizes them individually. And then we come together as a team to prioritize them together as a team. This is a really enlightening, transparency raising exercise that you can run with your teams. If you haven't done this with a team that you've worked with for more than a few sprints, I'd really encourage you to do this. As a Scrum Master, this really helps you get a grip on the personalities and perspectives within your team and really harnesses that team feeling. A question I'll often get as well is, once we get beyond Scrum, what are some additional values that we can talk about? I asked the question at the start of the call, but just to give an example of some of the more progressive ideas and values that I see in teams that I work with, we see things like empathy, accountability, curiosity, sustainability, integrity, collaboration, resilience. There's lots of good ideas beyond just Scrum. Don't pin yourself down to just the 5. Look for what else is relevant to your team and in your unique context. And we're just about the finish line. So please don't take the values as just words on a page. Please don't look at them as fluff. They are really helpful for most successful Scrum teams, whether they acknowledge that explicitly or not. They can act as a really positive collective conscience for a team, guiding decisions, actions, and by embracing them, you're much better able to empower teams, build stronger relationships, and elevate the value delivery. Please have a go at some of these tactics. Look at them as a bit of an experiment within the team, see how they land, sense and respond. And the final thought is a quote from Elvis. One I really liked for this values talk was values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them all over everything that you do. I think that pulls me to right about on time. I don't know if I've got much time left for questions. I don't know if I've got any. Sorry, I've been sharing my screen, but I'm very open to take any questions now if anyone's got them. Unless I need to shut up and go away.
No, you do have a question from Dimitri. He's saying thanks for the presentation, and what actions can replace blame and shame, but in the same moment, person must feel responsibility for mistakes and take actions to more focused tasks.
Good question. Really good one. The calling card for me that I'll usually go to is taking an experimentation style approach. So instead of, so I'll put some words in your mouth here, Dimitri. I am imagining you've got a Scrum team member coming to you with a problem. Instead of me saying, how's this problem happened? Why haven't you fixed this? This is your responsibility. I would take an outlook of, okay, let's run an experiment for how we can improve the situation with relation to this specific problem. I'd encourage the Scrum team to ideate on some experiments that we can run. And then as part of the retrospective or as part of any other event, you can check in on how that experiment's going and then adjust course as needed. Experiments are really powerful to generate that commitment within the team as well, especially if they are coming to you with that problem themselves. That really indicates that they want to solve that problem as well. Framing it around an experiment's a really good step forward.